Hey, it's Tyler at crazyaboutcompost.com. How's it going? Today I'm going to review the Envirocycle again. I haven't used this thing in a long time, but I thought now that it's been a little while, why not bring it back into the mix? And I'll go over the features of it, what's good about it, what's not so good about it, and then we'll track its progress over the next couple weeks, see how it does after I load it up. Okay, so let's check it out. The Envirocycle is a good 35 gallons in capacity, and for the price tag that does seem a little low, because for about 20 bucks I can get a trash can and poke a bunch of holes in it and do almost the exact same thing as the Envirocycle for a fraction of the cost, and the capacity is almost the same. But enough on that, let's get back to the features on this thing. If you want to go with the Envirocycle, it is definitely aesthetically pleasing, and the function in the bottom with the compost tea collection, I don't really recommend using it for compost tea. However, if you have a backyard where it's just concrete and you don't have any dirt, then this will be a good option for collecting any extra moisture, so your composting effort is off the ground and would definitely minimize any mess. I don't know what happened to the cap, but I never had mine on there anyway. As it would fill up, I just let it run out. So just to look a little closer at it, here's how it works. There's a bunch of wheels on it to keep the drum moving smoothly, and then there's some holes, and you can pick how many you want to be open or closed to control the moisture going into the bottom. But if you're doing the process as you should be, there shouldn't be that much moisture anyway, because you need to be making sure that you're adding at least twice as much browns as you are greens to this thing, so that should balance out any extra moisture. The other thing about the Envirocycle, the newer models now have an official venting system on the side, but at the time mine didn't. So I drilled a bunch of holes on both sides of my drum, and that was to help it with airflow, because the common complaint you'll hear about these things is that the contents get really soggy and clumpy, and so when you roll them around, they tend to bang around and not really do a good job. And again, that's just due to imbalance and also just not having enough airflow. So if you have a model like mine, make sure that you add some holes to the sides, but the newer ones do have vents. And then the door, we have a plastic latch. The newer models have metal ones, and I wish mine had metal. I had to replace mine because the plastic latch actually warped, but I was able to replace it, and the customer service was excellent. They sent me a new latch, no questions asked, and I bought this thing a really long time ago, so that was cool. So this will be more than enough fuel to get started with our first batch for the Envirocycle. So we have the leaves, and then we have my week's worth of food scraps. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to continuously add to the Envirocycle instead of the other option, which would be to already have a full batch ready for the thing and just load it up, set it, and forget it. But in most situations, you're going to have a week-by-week basis where you fill up your kitchen food scrap collector and you want to empty it. So that's how we're going to do this. So to get started, I'm going to add a whole bunch of brown materials, which is my shredded leaves. Here we go. One big handful. Do a second big handful. And we'll do one more. What the heck, we'll do another one. It's really hard to go wrong with adding too much brown material. The key with these things is to not let them get oversaturated, which is what happens when you add too much food scraps and not enough browns to absorb. So those handfuls, those are about the size of this. So now I'm going to add my one serving of food scraps. Using my rain barrel, I just rinsed out my food scrap collector and dumped that water back into the Envirocycle, and that's the only water I'm going to add. I probably shouldn't have even added that, so that'll be a good test for it. So I'm telling you, the main challenge everybody contacts me about with these things is that it just turns into these huge clumpy globs of material, and that's because the material is way too wet. So as you saw, I added way more brown material than food scraps, and I'm going to keep that proportion up. So let's give it a spin. And this plastic latch, we'll see how long it lasts. I wish that the metal one worked with my model, but oh well. thing's actually really easy to rotate. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort to make it go. Here's the slits on the bottom of the drum. This is where any extra drainage, moisture, leachate would exit and go into the bottom collector. One more spin. These ridges on here are nice and deep. Again, makes it really easy to rotate. Let's run through the pros and cons of the Envirocycle real quick. First of all, for the pros, this thing's great to look at. It's nice and neat. I think it fits well in any backyard, front yard, whatever. The leachate collector is good for anyone who has a strictly concrete backyard. So this way it captures any additional leachate and material and keeps it from kind of going all over the place. Just don't lose the cap and you'll be all set. For the cons, I would say also this, if you're getting this because of the compost tea feature, look elsewhere, because remember that the materials in here are breaking down and any moisture and leachate running out of that going into here is not from finished compost. And that stuff is really unbalanced and is not going to be something you would want to put on your plants. If you really wanted to make that work, and I don't think this would be the way to do it, you would fill this thing with finished compost and mix in rainwater in some amount, but I really don't see the point in doing it that way. You could just fill a 5-gallon bucket with a couple handfuls of finished compost and then add rainwater to it, stir it around, let it sit for a little while, and you'll probably get better results than you would with adding unfinished moisture into the bottom and then add it to your plants. It's kind of weird. Okay, the airflow on this thing is kind of questionable. I noticed that the newer models do have proper vents on the side. We'll see how they work. With mine, I just drilled holes because there was no ventilation on it, and that's what leads to having a soggy mess. And the latch on mine is plastic, which I don't really like, but the customer service was great and they sent me a new one right away. It took many years for mine to warp, but remember that when that happens, you're out of luck because then the door won't stay shut and you can't tumble it. All right, great. So that's the Envirocycle. It's kind of cool to get back into this. I haven't used this or made a video about it in a long time, but if you're trying to get started composting and this is something that looks good to you, then you should go for it. And if you want to make this thing work, again, the key is always make sure whatever amount of food scraps you add at least twice that in brown materials. That's the key, because otherwise it's just going to get too damp in there and you're just going to have a mess and you're going to hate composting and you just spend a bunch of money on this thing. Great. All right, well, if you're looking for more tips on how to compost effectively, go to crazyaboutcompost.com. I have a free email course that goes through all the different tips and tricks to help you get started regardless of what your personal situation is, whether you live on a farm or in the city, don't have a lot of space to work with, what have you. And I also have a ebook available as well that I put out not too long ago that goes into even further details about how you can really compost with ease. Because at the end of the day, composting is super simple. You just have to know a couple tips and tricks, and you could do it in as little as 5, maybe 10 minutes tops per week. It's pretty good for keeping all your organic materials out of the landfill and not having to rely on somebody else to do the right thing for you, such as with your recycling pickups, for example. This, you compost right in your own backyard. You can use the soil the following year to, run your garden or for horticultural purposes, what have you. Either way, it's great. I urge you to get started. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.